This conference will now be recorded.
All right, good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Melissa Malora, the Public Outreach Coordinator here at the South Jersey Transportation Planning Organization. On Wednesday, July 5th, we opened a 45-day public comment period for 4 of our planning products, and those products include the Transportation Improvement Program, Transportation Conformity Determination, Regional Transportation Plan, and Public Involvement Plan. The meeting being held tonight is required as part of the public process, and we will be providing an overview of all 4 documents. However, since the tip was the reason for us making the edits to the other 3 products, we'll largely be focusing on the tip and its significance in the region. Because after all, the tip is our list of roadway projects, and we want all of you to be informed on how state and federal transportation funding is being spent in the region. We hope that you came prepared with questions, but if not, that's okay. Please know that we will be accepting comments through Sunday, August 20th, and I'll be providing more information about that later in the presentation. So tonight we're using the GoToMeeting platform, and we recognize that some people might not be familiar with the platform. So I just want to go through a few features. The first would be the mute and unmute button. So when you're unmute, it'll show as green. It's the little microphone icon, and then muted, it'll be red. We ask that everyone remain muted for the majority of the presentation. We are accepting comments and questions throughout, so if you would like to unmute, we just ask that you state your name before asking your question or comment. We also have a chat feature that's shown at the top. It's a speech bubble, so if that's how you prefer to comment with us, please feel free to do so. There's also a camera feature. It would be great to see all of your faces, but it's not required. Okay, so this is the general outline of what we'll be covering tonight. We were anticipating holding our July Community Outreach and Engagement Committee meeting. I did hear from several members, and they said that they weren't able to attend. I thought we were going to have 1 or 2 members, but I'm not seeing any. I'll still give the recap of what happened at our May meeting just for the purposes of those in attendance today. So at the last meeting, we actually had David Heller and Taylor Waymeyer, who are both here tonight. They were presenting Dave was presenting on the Access for All Transit Plan, because that's the Human Services Transportation Plan, and our Community Outreach and Engagement Committee members, they had an interest in that. And then Taylor presented on the microtransit feasibility study, which directly links to human services transportation. And that study has since concluded, and I shared a link with all of our COEC members. If anyone in attendance would like that link, I can always provide that later in the presentation. So transitioning back to tonight's presentation, we did prepare several slides. It's roughly 45 minutes long. Hopefully that's not a deterrent, but I think it's some great content that we're going to be presenting. And since we're only anticipating being here an hour, I'll now introduce you to the team. So as I mentioned, I'm Melissa Malora. I'm the Public Outreach Coordinator. So in terms of the tip, I prepared all public outreach materials, so that way the public knows how to get involved and when to get involved, and making sure that we're meeting all federal requirements. I'm also the primary author of the Public Involvement Plan, which you'll be hearing about a little bit tonight. We also have Taylor Waymeyer. She is the assistant planner, and she's also the technical manager of the TIP. David Heller's here tonight, and he is a program manager, and he is also the primary author of and technical manager of the Transportation Conformity Determination document, and the RTP. And we have Jennifer Marandino. She is the executive director, so she oversees the organization and its efforts and all of our products. We do have several partners on the call with us, so if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself. I can't remember who we said was going to go first. Is it Kimberly? So we'll start with her if she doesn't mind.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kimberly Nance. I'm with the New Jersey Department of Transportation, Office of Government and Community Relations. I'm here to assist the department in any way that we can.
Hi, I'm Nicole Daniel, also from New Jersey Department of Transportation. I am in the Capital Program Development Unit.
I think I'm next. I'm Lou Milan, Senior Program Director of Capital Planning with New Jersey Transit. I work in the Planning Department.
And then John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm John Peterson. I'm a sub-regional technician with SJTPO.
And then I believe we have one more person on the call, possibly Brian, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself. Okay, we'll come back. I don't want to put you under the spot, or on the spot rather. All right, so this is a slide that we include in many of our presentations, and I think we do that because it does a nice job of providing an overview of who SJTPO is. So SJTPO was formed in 1993 and is the federally designated metropolitan planning organization serving Atlantic, Cape May, Cumberland, and Salem counties. We are one of 3 MPOs in New Jersey, and MPOs are required in urbanized areas with a population of 50,000 or more. And just as a reference, SJTPO's wintertime population is approximately 588,000. And then in the summer, that skyrockets to 1.7 million, and that's according to the 2020 census. Interestingly enough, if SJTPO was its own state, based off of our wintertime population, we would be the 9th densest state, and then based off of the summertime population, we could be as high as the 3rd densest state. Overall, SJTPO's primary function includes providing access to federal transportation funds, serving as a technical resource, and then working to promote state and federal planning priorities in South Jersey. So the documents that you see on this slide, the RTP, PIP, and TIP, are some of our core products. So that means that they are required and they form the backbone of SJTPO. The RTP is the long-term vision for SJTPO, and it plans out for the horizon of 20 years. And the RTP is currently available for public comment, and Dave will be talking about that plan more so in the next slide. So the PIP outlines the regulations, outreach tools, and techniques we use to involve the public. And then the TIP is our list of projects. It's updated every 2 years, and Taylor will be speaking more on that, and actually Jen too, in their portion of the presentation. I did want to mention that the TIP was last prepared in 2021, so this is the next TIP update cycle. The RTP is the guiding document for the TIP, so all federally funded projects in the TIP must be included in the RTP. So to maintain consistency between both documents, we're updating the RTP along with the TIP this time around. And now I'll hand it over to Dave to discuss the RTP.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. So as Melissa noted, the RTP creates the long-term vision for the SJTPO, planning for a horizon of 20 years. Federal regulations require that the RTP and the TIP are consistent. The current RTP was adopted in January of 2021 and included projects from the TIP for federal fiscal years 2022 through 2031. Because new projects were added in the federal fiscal year 2024 to 2033 TIP, the RTP must be updated to be consistent. In making the updates, a few other new sections were added. The RTP relationship to the TIP is a new section added to the RTP to indicate that the RTP is the guiding document for the TIP, as Melissa just said, with all federally funded projects in the TIP included in the RTP. To maintain consistency between the two, the RTP will first be revised whenever a revision to the TIP is required. So a new section to the TIP, or a new section in the RTP to describe the revision process was also added to the RTP. A memorandum of understanding, or MOU, between the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, which is the Philadelphia area MPO, the NJTPA, or North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, which is the MPO up to the north, SJTPO, New Jersey Transit, and New Jersey DOT, or Department of Transportation, exists now for revisions to the TIP. SJTPO intends to make use of these same procedures for RTP revisions. The RTP included tables 23 and 24, which listed projects to be completed by our local and state partners during federal fiscal years 2020 to 2031. Also in the RTP are hyperlinks to the TIP for both federal fiscal years 2022 to 2031 and federal fiscal years 2024 to 2033 TIPs. These hyperlinks were added to more explicitly show the linkage between the RTP and the TIP and ensure consistency with the new TIP. Table 25 in the RTP, which displays projects programmed through line items for CMAQ, or congestion mitigation and air quality, which is a federal program that will be discussed in a little later, the carbon reduction program, or CRP, the highway safety improvement program, HSIP. As you can see, we use a lot of acronyms in this business. Safe Routes to School, or SRTS, and the TA set aside, or Transportation Alternative set aside. These are all explicitly listed in Table 25 for federal fiscal years 2020 through 2027. While this public meeting is related to revisions to the RTP 2020, work on the next RTP is underway. 2 new technical studies, scenario planning, and the fiscal year 2023 to 2024 demographics analysis are or will be underway shortly. Both will underpin the next RTP. And now back to Melissa.
Okay, thanks, Dave. So as I mentioned before, the PIP is a core product that outlines our public outreach process. It was updated last year to provide information on translation and interpretation services currently being offered. Excuse me. And then this year, the PIP is being updated to better reflect the relationship between the RTP and the TIP. This update was a recommendation from our federal partners during our federal certification review process in March. And so the edits to the PIP now allow us to mention the type of amendments and modifications that can be made to the RTP and the TIP, and how the public and our regional stakeholders can be involved throughout the revision process. I'm not going to get into the weeds about those, the amendments and modifications, only because Taylor's going to be discussing that later. In terms of tonight's meeting, before I hand it over to Jen, I just want to first mention that tonight we'll be providing much more detail about the TIP and the roadway projects listed in the TIP. Please keep in mind that these projects are in the early stages of development and that the TIP documentation represents the initial funding slated for the next 10 years. And this funding was agreed upon between SJTPO, NJDOT, and then FHWA. We recognize that concerns may come up. You might have concerns about residential streets such as potholes or speed limits. We're not really here to address those concerns tonight, mainly because we're not the appropriate entity. However, we can be a resource. One of our resources that we have readily available is our public engagement guide, and specifically towards the end, you'll see a knowing who to contact section. So based on your concern, it will have who you should reach out to. The URL is listed on the slide, but I'll read it aloud. It's www.sjtpo.org/engagement guide, and we find that it's a really great resource. I'm advocating for you to look at it because I was the one that authored it. But with that, I'll hand it over to Jen.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. So what is the TIP? Essentially, in order to spend federal dollars, MPO must produce a Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP. As Dave mentioned, we have a lot of acronyms that we're utilizing. So the TIP, I think Ms. Melissa mentioned this earlier, is a list of projects that reflect major investments in our region and the different types of funding that flows into it. So the structure of the TIP, you can see on the slide there, is such that the first 4 years of the TIP are programmed from October 1st, 2023 until September 30th, 2027. They can't exceed the available resources. So, and then the last 6 years of the TIP, so 2027 to 2033, are for informational only. In New Jersey, I think Melissa mentioned this as well, the TIP is updated every 2 years, providing SJTPO the opportunity to suballocate essentially $24 million worth of resources to our sub-regional partners each TIP cycle. So that's a pretty significant amount, but I'll just throw a few other numbers out to you. NJDOT is programming over $378 million in this constrained 4-year TIP cycle in the SJTPO region. And then New Jersey Transit is programming about $170 million during this same time. So how does the funding kind of flow? So the slide provides a visual representation of how that FHWA funding is distributed throughout the SJTPO region. Essentially, all funds flow, again, this is federal highway, all funds flow, through USDOT to NJDOT, and then portions of that are sub-allocated to SJTPO, and then ultimately to our 4 counties as illustrated on the slide. Federal Highway, or FHWA, and the Federal Transit Administration, or FTA, are our major funding sources for projects in the TIP. In addition to this, the state has additional resources, essentially appropriations through the Transportation Trust Fund that can be used to fund select projects. So counties, municipalities, private developers, toll roads, et cetera, are also potential funding sources for projects. Projects are funded under various funding sources dependent upon the type of work complete, and then we'll touch a little bit more on this a little further into the presentation. So SJTPO's TIP is one component of the statewide Transportation Improvement Program, or the STIP, for the entire state of New Jersey. So the illustration here essentially represents that all 3 TIPs, so SJTPO's TIP, DVRPC's TIP, and NJTPA's TIP, all come together and form the statewide Transportation Improvement Program. I think what I want to mention here also is that not only is this public meeting for SJTPO's TIP, but it's also for the statewide Transportation Improvement Program, or the STIP portion of that it falls within the SJTPO region. So Melissa showed the slide on the right-hand side, but it shows that all of the 3 MPOs are virtually covering the entirety of the state. And again, all 3 of those TIPs come together and make up the STIP itself. So the TIP is actually a very large document. Highway projects or programs to be advanced by our county municipal partners, and also those led by NJDOT and New Jersey Transit in the SJTP region, make up the full SJTPO TIP document. So the TIP itself, or the STIP rather, serves 2 purposes. So I mentioned it being a large document, so essentially it's a comprehensive one-volume guide to all of the major transportation investment in the entirety of the state of New Jersey that is federally funded. And then it also serves as a reference document required under federal regulations for use by FHWA and FTA in approving the expenditures of the federal funds for transportation projects, in the state of New Jersey. So while the TIP is effective October 1st, the development process schedule essentially begins 15 months before. So I'm not going to go into all the details that you see on the slide, but essentially in August of last year, 2022, SJTPO began the process of requesting basic project information from our sub-regional partners, the 4 counties that I mentioned, and then sharing the initial list with NJDOT. We provided initial feedback to our partners to improve the project implementation and ensure adherence to federal goals. So next, the resources are determined by our federal and state partners, and drafting of the budget for the TIP is started. Once the draft TIP and then also the transportation conformity documents are complete, SJTPO begins a public involvement process to ensure that all interested parties have the opportunity to provide public comment on the proposed program. In keeping with our federal mandates, we actively seek and promote public participation in that planning process. I think Melissa mentioned also earlier that the TIP is open for a minimum 30-day public comment period. And then there's also various ways, as she'll mention at the end of the presentation, of how those comments could be made. The public comment period began on July 5th, and Melissa mentioned it'll end on August 20th. So the public meeting that we're having tonight is part of that process. Essentially, we want your feedback. All comments are formally documented with responses incorporated into that final TIP document, which is brought to our technical advisory committee and our policy board for consideration of final adoption in September of 2023, and then becomes effective on October 1st, as mentioned earlier. Thanks, Melissa. This graphic essentially shows the development of the TIP requires close collaboration and is an iterative process. As I mentioned, we coordinate with our sub-regional partners, again, Atlantic County, also Atlantic City, Cape May County, Cumberland County, Salem County, and the city of Vineland. Both of those 2 cities are part of our policy board, and that is based upon our bylaws. So essentially, we're working with those partners to identify and prioritize projects for inclusion in the TIP using a project evaluation process that Taylor will touch upon a little bit later. We work with New Jersey Transit and NJDOT capital programming staff to forecast the availability of federal funds over that 10-year period of the TIP. And essentially, the TIP represents projects and programs which are reasonably expected to advance to construction or implementation over the 10-year period. The process allows for changes. We've also alluded to that with respect to the MOU. I think Dave mentioned it as well. So let me turn it over to Taylor next. That'll talk a little bit more about details about the TIP and the project selection process.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. So the TIP document is a very large document containing nearly 350 pages, but this slide shows a few key components of the TIP to help break down the document. 120 pages of the TIP are the list of projects that will be funded over the next 10 years. In the previous slides, Jennifer spoke about the coordination that goes into developing the TIP document. Next, I will provide an overview of the SJTPO project evaluation process and the financial plan. A little later, Dave will provide more information on performance-based planning and the transportation conformity process that must occur alongside the TIP. SJTPO has a project evaluation process and ranking system used to evaluate locally led projects. The first step of the SJTPO project evaluation process is the pre-evaluation screening. Before a project is advanced for prioritization and inclusion in the TIP, SJTPO staff will assess projects for the items as listed, such as safety, context, and context-appropriate design, to address opportunities to enhance projects to better meet federal, state, and regional guidance, targets, and priorities. The SJTPO project evaluation process, as shown on the screen, is comprised of 4 sections to support specific RTP goals, as listed. Sections 1 and 2 reflect SJTPO planning initiatives such as, and not limited to, traffic congestion, pavement condition, context-appropriate designs, and evacuation routes. Section 3 measures the potential impact of the project, and Section 4 measures the cost-effectiveness of the project. One of the key elements of the TIP is the financial plan. Federal planning regulations require the TIP to contain a financial plan that demonstrates how it will be implemented. Fiscal constraint is required and is defined as a program of projects that does not exceed the resources in any given federal fiscal year. In accordance with federal regulation, federal expenditures in the first 4 years of the TIP are strictly fiscally constrained. The TIP must indicate the resources from public and private sources that are reasonably expected to be made available, as well as any recommendations for innovative funding needs in the region. The breakdown of expenditures and resources are included in tables 1 through 10 in the TIP. Each project or program in the TIP has a specific management category assigned to it. There are various project categories, including local system support, road assets, and congestion relief, as shown in this graph. This is how funding is spent in the region. The estimated total of $45 billion constitutes the funding expected to be available to support the full 10 years of the STIP. These resources are to be spent on projects or programs throughout the state. Of the estimated total, only a fraction of this money will be made available to local jurisdictions for improvements of projects on the local system. For federally funded projects, the primary source of funding is the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, or STVGP. These projects are often referred to as local lead projects, since the county serves as the project sponsor and is the responsible agency for moving the project through the project delivery process. The 4 STVGP funding categories available for use in the SJTPO region are listed and correspond to a specific geographical area on the map based on population. It is important to note this resource is provided by US DOT to set through federal regulation, whereas these resources are provided by NJDOT and are determined based on priority projects each year. During the development of the TIP, SJTPO staff programs local lead projects with the appropriate funding category in accordance with the applicable urbanized area. As shown on the map, the light blue area makes up a majority of the SJTPO region. This plays an important role in designating funding. In addition to this, the dark gray area represents the Philadelphia urbanized area and is primarily located in DVRPC. Since this area reflects funding availability in another MPO, SJTPO is unable to program these federal resources in these locations, specifically in Salem County and Cumberland County. Aside from STVGP funds, additional funding, as listed, is available to the counties and municipalities in the SJTPO region through NJ Transit and NJDOT, but distributed by SJTPO. These funds typically have their own distinct project selection criteria and are solicited on a different timeline than the TIP itself. Additional information for all of these funding sources are available on the SJTPO website. STVGP funding supports the enhancement of the regional transportation system. Through the SJTPO project selection process, priority projects are selected and funded in each subregion. The legend in the bottom corner of the map shows the different types of federally funded projects. The SJTPO local lead projects are shown in light blue, and the NJDOT projects are in dark blue. The light purple lines represent the municipalities. The projects displayed on this slide represent the specific project locations within Section 2 of the TIP, which we will touch on later in this presentation. This includes projects on the state and local roadway system being led by our county or NJDOT partners. In the next few slides, I will highlight a few projects in each county. Atlantic County priority projects support improvements to pavement condition and along evacuation routes. Atlantic City priority projects support improvements along flood zones. SJTPO NTA funding is supporting Philadelphia Avenue and a pedestrian connection along Cedar Creek, Egg Harbor Lake, and Egg Harbor City. NJDOT funding is supporting Route 40 from Cologne Avenue to West End Avenue in Egg Harbor Township, and Atlantic City. This project will raise the roadway to reduce flooding and will include new pavement, curbs, and sidewalks, the relocation of aerial and underground utilities, and new drainage. CMAQ is supporting Pacific Avenue from Hartford Avenue to Massachusetts Avenue in Atlantic City by installing traffic signal systems for synchronization. Cape May County priority projects support improvements to pavement condition, traffic congestion along flood zones for improvements and evacuation routes. TA funding is supporting a trail in Ocean City along the Creek Horn tributary connecting to 51st Street. SJTPO funding is supporting Town Bank Road from Clubhouse Drive to Bayshore Road in Lower Township. This project will complete repaving, drainage improvements, new curbs, ramps, and gutters, as well as traffic calming measures, such as lane markings for speed awareness. SJTPO is also supporting Seashore Road from Route 47 to Route 9 in a 3-phase project in Middle and Lower Township. This project will complete repaving with safety improvements, enhanced lane markings, and minor drainage improvements. Cumberland County priority projects support improvements along heavy freight movement areas or corridors. The City of Vineland priority projects support improvements to pavement condition, traffic congestion, and along heavy freight movement areas as well. SJTPO funding is supporting Mill Road from Weymouth Road to Garden Road and a 3-phase project as well in the City of Vineland. This project includes repaving to resolve the existing potholes and rutting due to heavy truck traffic. NJDOT funding is supporting the Route 49 and Buckshottem Road intersection to address safety and operational improvements in the Bridgeton City area. HSIP funding is supporting pedestrian safety improvements and traffic calming on East Avenue from Elmer Street to Walnut Street in the City of Vineland, and on 3rd Street and Wheaton Avenue from G Street to Main Street in the City of Millville. Salem County priority projects support improvements along evacuation routes. SRTS funding is supporting pedestrian safety improvements, the inclusion of a sidewalk, and a 4-way stop around Pennsville Middle School from Dunn Lane to Pittsfield Street in Pennsville Township. SJTPO funding is also supporting Commissioner's Pike from Watson Mill Road to Woodstown-Daretown Road in Alloway and Piles Grove Township. This project will repave and reconstruct as needed to support safety improvements such as new lifelong epoxy traffic stripes, raised pavement markers, and the installation of new signage which meet the current FHWA guidelines for retroreflectivity. HSIP funding is supporting 2 roundabouts in Pittsgrove Township to slow down traffic, increase pedestrian traffic, and reduce traffic. Those are 5 and 6 points. CMAQ and CRP funding supports the reduction of harmful emissions and improves air quality. Projects are solicited every 3 years and evaluated by our sub-regional partners and for priority funding. The projects programmed to support this funding source include traffic signal synchronization and a study for implementing microtransit in Cape May County. HSIP funding supports the reduction of fatal and serious injury crashes. The projects programmed to support this funding source include traffic calming and pedestrian safety improvements and roundabouts to slow down traffic, increase pedestrian traffic, and reduce crashes. For the full project list and descriptions for CMAQ, CRP, and HSIP projects, please visit our website. Earlier in the presentation, I noted that the project list makes up much of the TIP document. So let's explore that a bit more. What does a TIP project sheet look like? This is a typical project sheet and can be found starting on page 50 of the TIP document. All of the funding, as mentioned so far, is allocated to projects or line items. The DBNUM, or database number, allows those involved with the TIP and STIP to easily identify the projects. The project name, county, municipality, and sponsor provide additional information to also further identify the project. The description of the project may include recommendations and project specifications. The mileposts provide the approximate limits for the projects. Please do note that programs do not have milepost limits listed and are usually identified as various in the TIP. The phase references the phase of work. On this sheet, CON refers to construction. Other phases include DES for preliminary engineering or final design, ROW for right-of-way, etc. The fund identifies the funding source and the amount is listed by year. In this case, federal fiscal years 2024 to 2033. And finally, the asset management category references the type of project, which was displayed in the pie chart that I showed earlier in the presentation. A copy of this annotated tip sheet can also be found on page 27 of the tip. As mentioned, TIP project sheets make up pages 50 to 169 of the TIP document. These are all the projects that will be funded over a 10-year period. The sections or chapters provide context to the projects, such as regional, statewide, and NJ Transit projects, these that are contained in their pages as listed. Each section begins with a summary table and is followed by the TIP sheets we just discussed in the previous slide. Section 2 includes project on the state and local roadway system, being led by our county or NJDOT partners. This includes projects along Route 9 in Atlantic County and Route 47 in Cumberland County. Section 3 includes specific programs being advanced by NJDOT, including bridge, deck, superstructure replacement program, and ADA curb ramp implementation, which could include various locations within one statewide program. Section 4 includes projects or programs as led by NJ Transit and as noted could include various locations within one statewide program. Now back to Jennifer to discuss what happens after the TIP and STIP is approved.
So I think we mentioned a few different times that the TIP is developed every 2 years. The TIP is updated as needed through a modification and amendment process as outlined in the document Dave mentioned before, or the MOU or Memorandum of Understanding. As noted, federal regulations require that each project or project phase included in the TIP shall be consistent with the approved RTP. So to maintain that consistency between both documents, the RTP will be revised alongside the TIP, utilizing again the MOU to determine the exact process to make those changes. The process is broken down into amendments and modifications, with amendments being the highest level of change. An amendment is required in such instances when a new project was added to the TIP or a project is deleted. Additionally, an amendment or modification is required when a phase of work has an increase with the level of change dictated by the specific type of threshold of that increase. If a major amendment is completed, a 30-day public comment period is required to garner feedback from our federal and state partners as well as the public. Although a minor amendment or modification does not require a 30-day public comment period, both major and minor amendments require our approval from our TAC, our Technical Advisory Committee, or our policy board, and our policy board. All amendments and modifications are reviewed by the appropriate agency, advanced by the MPO, so either the NJDOT or New Jersey Transit, depending upon the exact nature of the project change, and then approved by Federal Highway or again FTA, depending upon the agency that's advancing that. It's important to note that the public can participate in our Technical Advisory Committee meetings, provide feedback on any amendment or modification and as presented in the meetings, and the same would hold true at our policy board meetings as well. In earlier slides, it was noted that SJTPO consults and collaborates or coordinates with agencies and officials when completing our transportation planning activities. More details on how and whom that happens are included in Appendix A of the TIP document. We noted earlier that SJTPO works with our sub-regional, county and municipal partners to identify and prioritize projects for the TIP. We coordinate also with US EPA, the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, NJDEP, to demonstrate that the TIP will meet air quality standards through the Transportation Conformity process. When the draft TIP and the conformity are prepared, SJTPO begins, again, we talked about this, the public process to ensure that all individuals, affected agencies, private transportation providers, and other interested parties have the opportunity to provide comment on the proposed program. During this coordination process, SJTPO must also include federally and state recognized tribes in New Jersey and provide them with the opportunity to provide comments. So now we'll turn that over to Dave to discuss components of the RTP and the linkage to performance, of the TIP, including linkages to performance-based planning and the transportation conformity analysis.
Okay, thank you, Jen. So increasing emphasis is being placed on performance-based planning and performance targets. These targets are part of SJTPO's performance-based planning process, which aims to strengthen the linkage between policies and long-range decisions, specific transportation investments in the system, and measurable outcomes of transportation investments. To guide agencies in carrying out performance-based planning, the DOT, US DOT, has issued 5 specific rules mandating the establishment of specific performance management measures and targets. The Federal Highway Administration, or FHWA, administers rules covering the safety, pavement and bridge conditions, and system performance measures and targets, while FTA, or the Federal Transit Administration, administers rules governing transit asset management and public transportation safety, as depicted on the slide. SJTPO is required to set its own targets or support the state's targets for each measure. The specific targets, as well as progress towards meeting the targets, are listed in Appendix B of the TIP. Projects in the TIP may be selected to help meet goals and targets mandated by these performance rules. SJTPO also has a targets webpage, www.sjtpo.org/performance, which lists all of our approved and supported targets and the progress we are making towards meeting these targets. Because the SJTPO region is in a non-attainment area for ozone, transportation conformity is required whenever a new TIP and/or plan is adopted, or there is a significant amendment to either, as explained earlier. Non-attainment means that the outside air quality for ozone falls beneath the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, or NAAQS, another acronym, as set by the US EPA, or Environmental Protection Agency. The current ozone standards are 70 parts per billion. The SJTPO region cannot exceed these standards. All future projects and programs in the TIP and the RTP are required to conform to these standards. This is done through a complex emissions modeling process that projects future vehicular emissions and compares them against pre-established emissions budgets. A successful conformity determinations means that we have passed all the required emissions tests, meaning that our TIP and RTP conform to the national air quality standards set by the US EPA, and all of our projects can proceed without delay. More details on this process, as well as the actual results, are included as part of the Transportation Conformity Determination, which is Appendix C of the TIP. This slide depicts the 8-hour ozone region that SJTPO falls into. As you can see, the non-attainment region covers more than just the 4-county SJTPO region, including the Philadelphia metropolitan region. as well as the Wilmington, Delaware area. While there is ozone generated within our region, and mostly from transportation, much of the ozone problem within our region is from transport of ozone from the north and the west, both of which are very industrialized. Nonetheless, all it takes is one monitor within the entire air quality non-attainment region to not meet the standards for the whole entire region, to make it fall into non-attainment. And now back to Jennifer.
Okay, actually,
Melissa, I'm sorry.
I'm gonna handle this.
I'm sorry.
It looks like our only member of the public dismissed himself, and we only have our federal partners. So we're not gonna go through the discussion that we had planned. There also seems to be another meeting that's starting to take place next door. We apologize if you heard any of the background information. So we don't anticipate any of our federal partners having anything to say during this discussion period. So I'll just move forward to the next slide. So this slide details the specific steps for the TIP and the Transportation Conformity Determination. As we mentioned several times throughout the presentation, the public comment period will end Sunday, August 20th. After that time, staff will review and respond to all comments. Formal responses along with the comments will be provided in the final plan. And then on Monday, September 11th, the TIP will be brought to the TAC for recommendation of policy board approval. And then if approved by members of the TAC, the TIP will be reviewed at the Monday, September 25th public meeting of the policy board. And then afterwards, the TIP and the transportation conformity document will be submitted to NJDOT, with NJDOT submitting the documents to FHWA, FTA, and EPA. The agencies will review and approve the plans in October of this year. Excuse me. This is our final slide of the presentation, and excuse me. It just summarizes how members of the public can participate after the public meeting. So we did update the TIP webpage. You can find that TIP webpage at www.shtpo.org. The additional ways to comment include email, and that's tip@shtpo.org. On the TIP webpage, you'll also see a comment form towards the bottom of the page. We also accept comments via fax and even mail if that's something that you're interested in doing. And we also accept comments via social media, so Facebook and Twitter. Again, comments are open. We're accepting comments through Sunday, August 20th, so that's about a month away. We do have physical copies available at the SJTPO office and participating state depository libraries in the region. We just suggest that you go online to the TIP webpage just to double check those lists of libraries. We put it up there so it's easily accessible for everyone. We do offer translation and interpretation services. There's a request form on the website, so if that's something that you need or are interested in, please check that out. And then for purposes, or if you would want to review this presentation rather, we are posting it to YouTube, and we're going to be distributing it on the website and even social media. And you can find SJTPO. Our handle is at SJTPO1161, or you can just type SJTPO into the YouTube search engine. That's all for us. I don't know if any of our planning partners have anything to say. If not, we're just going to end the presentation here, and we greatly appreciate everyone being here with us tonight. I didn't see anyone unmute, so with that, have a good rest of your night. Thanks so much.